This is hull for our boat, and in this episode we will determine what is the engine size that fits on it. Powering and resistance, it's a big topic in the shipbuilding world, and engines are big and costly. Development of modern prediction methods started 2 centuries ago, and we can talk months about that. So it was really good challenge to explain you how to predict it and make a choice on the engine size in a short time frame. After some brainstorm sessions, I figured out how to do it, and I prepared something for you. Stay tuned till the end and you will see what it is. Hello there everyone. Thank you for joining me again in my boat design series. In this step, we are going to determine what engine we need to put on our boat to reach the speed that we want. This is really difficult one. Resistance and powering is a big deal in boat building, but in shipbuilding even bigger. And there are lots of spreadsheets or diagrams that are offering us to cut the corners. I found this one in the boat data book, so let's try it. Let's see where it's going to lead us. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to lay down on the left side of your screen example 1, and here's the clean sheet. So we are starting with the length of the waterline. I'm going to enter into hull design tool and check what is our draft for that displacement of 1910 kilogram, and it looks like it's 0.482. Then I'm going to Rhino, make a line on 0.482 and measure the length of waterline. So now we have a length of our waterline. We can enter into diagram. Next step is to put a line through 2 points. One is length of waterline, the other one is displacement. Be aware displacement is a long ton, so we need to convert a little bit. Next step is to create a line from right baseline through 20 horsepower mark on a scale for the horsepower all the way to the left baseline. Next step is to bounce back to beam to draft ratio. In our case that's 4.87, and then we can read what's a speed. So speed that in this setup, this graph gives us is 12 knots, and that's kind of strange, and I will explain shortly why that is strange. Now let's check what this graph is giving us for 5 knots of speed, and if we just slide this point on the left base mark, we can read out that horsepower or power required is very low. It's 3.5 horsepower. So now we have a thing. Every boat in our database it's 15 or 20 horsepower, and we have 3.5. That's significant difference. Now probably some of you will ask me, hey, but why are you not taking 12 knots into account? Why you are looking for 5 knots? Well, 12 is already semi-displacement range of sailing, and all these boats in the database, they are displacement boats. Now, probably some of you are asking why 12 knots is semi-displacement, how you know that? Well, let's touch on that. In shipbuilding and boat building as well, there is a number called Froude number. Froude number depends on the speed and length of the waterline of the vessel. Froude number of 0.4 marks end of displacement sailing. For you in America, you are familiar probably with the term hull speed. Hull speed is speed that is equivalent to Froude number of 0.4. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to lay down in Excel different Froude numbers, and I will calculate different speeds for that Froude numbers. Now we can see that for 0.4 we have a 5.6 knots, but in the same time let's calculate the hull speed according to formula for hull speed. And we see that numbers are completely the same. So that's what it is. So hull speed is equal to the speed on the Froude number 0.4. In the next series we are going to do planning craft. So that's where I will explain the Froude number dependencies and status of sailing and all that stuff. So let's park that for a side. Let's continue with displacement hull. Now when we know that maximum speed of the hull is 5.6 knots, let's continue calculating the power needed to get to that speed. And you will see later on why I'm not thinking about getting more than that. Now if we go back to diagram, we can see that for 5.6 knots of speed, we need roughly 4 horsepower, which is again 5 times less than what we have in statistical database. So that's obviously something is wrong. So we need to have different way of calculating, or at least let's make 2 methods of calculation, then compare them. Another way to predict power needed to propel the boat to certain speed is first to determine what is the resistance of the boat, and then convert that into power need. Resistance of the boat is very complicated topic. In order to explain it, we will need much more than this one episode. For beginning, let's start with just understanding what the resistance is consisting of. So let's decompose it in smaller pieces and then see how we can calculate them. 2 most dominant pieces of complete resistance are viscous or frictional resistance and wave resistance. On this picture from Principles of Yacht Design, you can see that total resistance is composed from several layers, and each of them is having some percentage of total resistance. So let's start with friction resistance. Friction resistance, by its name, it's saying that it's coming from friction between the hull and the water that's surrounding it. It is very simple to calculate, but there is a lot of hydrodynamic knowledge behind it. So I'm not going to bother you with that because this is beginning of series, so we just want to calculate resistance. In the book Principles of Yacht Design, there is a nice example on how you can calculate frictional resistance. So let's follow that and let's see what it's going to bring us. This is the formula that we can use to calculate frictional resistance. As you can see, input in this formula are speed, wetted area, density, and coefficient of frictional resistance. What we know so far, or at least what we can easily get from Rhino or some other tool, are speed, density, and wetted area. That means that the only unknown in this equation is coefficient of frictional resistance. The way to calculate frictional coefficient is through this formula, and the only input in that one is Reynolds number. Reynolds number, on the other hand, it's calculated with this formula, and there input we have a speed, kinematic viscosity of the water, and length of the body. So let's start laying that in Excel and start calculating. First, I will input formula for Reynolds number and calculate it for different range of speeds. Next step is to calculate frictional resistance coefficient, and now let's fill other values. So density of the water is 1000 kg per cubic meter, since we are designing the boat for canals or rivers, lakes. For speed, we have a range that we calculated from our Froude numbers. The only item that we need to find the value for is wetted area. Wetted area is fairly simple to get. I will open the Rhino, cut our hull on our draft, and just select all that surface that is below the water and type in a command prompt area. And there you go, you have it in a command prompt, as you can see, and that's what we are going to type in our calculation. Now we are going to type in formula in Excel and duplicate it over the range of speeds, and we have our frictional resistance. Additionally, I will just grab the values and put it in a chart so I can easily take from the chart, roughly speaking, values that for different range of speeds or different Froude numbers. Now when we have frictional resistance, let's go into the waves. Wave resistance is much more complicated than frictional resistance, and it depends on much more variables than frictional. People always try to predict resistance of the ship and speed of the ship. And in old days, they used towing tanks to pull the ships through the towing tank and measure what is resistance of the model ship, and then that results would be extrapolated to the big ship in order to predict how fast it will go or what power is needed. Nowadays, we have modern tools like computational fluid dynamics that enable us to predict behavior of the vessel on computer in very early stage, but that was not the case in past days. To make resistance prediction more practical, people start gathering results from various ship types and start investigating. And they realize that wave resistance for certain hull type or ship type were very, very similar. And they start grouping them in families. Families of those hulls are known as a series for prediction of resistance. That's how we got different series for different ship types. Holtrop Manor for cargo vessels, or Series 64 high-speed craft. So that's what people did. They created research projects, created families of hulls that are varying in various dimensions, whether it's length, beam, or even ratios, beam to draft, moving center of buoyancy or center of flotation. And then those results would be grouped, and output of those research projects were formulas that are giving us way to calculate in very early stage and in later stages wave resistance of the ship. One of the series that was created to investigate wave resistance of sailboats was done at Delft University. The results of these research projects are known as Delft Series 1, 2 and 3 because complete research was done in a span of 40 years in 3 big groups. And in Principles of Yacht Design we have that example as well, so we can follow what is written down in that book. And I know somebody will say, hey Nico, but you said they were done for sailboats. Yes, I said that, but these are displacement boats and we can see that we fit in that series. Now just a small remark for that series. In this series, scientists grouped wave resistance with viscous pressure resistance. Both of those are combinedly called residual resistance, and they group them. There is some logic in why they group them. They group them because both of these components of the resistance are highly dependent on three-dimensional shape of the hull. So there is logic behind it. So That means that in next steps we are going to calculate wave and viscous pressure resistance, or let's call it residual resistance, as a second big component of our total resistance. These are all coefficients that we need to put in for different Froude numbers. So that's what I'm going to do. So I will just type everything in Excel and start creating the formula. Also, what you can notice is that there is a lot of inputs in this formula. It's not as simple as frictional resistance. We have length of waterline, we have a beam on waterline, we have a draft, LCB, LCF, CP, CM, all these variables. When we have formula in, we need to start filling in those data. Where we are going to get them? Well, partially in Rhino, partially in hull tool, so let's start filling in. So length of waterline we already know, breadth of waterline we already know. We can always measure it from Rhino. LCB we know. Longitudinal center of flotation is actually geometrical center of water plane area. So if we just create the water plane in Rhino and type area centroid, we will get it. Then CP is prismatic coefficient, CM is a midship sectional area coefficient. And then we are going to do same what we did for frictional resistance. We're just going to type in formula for calculating resistance and duplicate it over the range of speeds. Now when we have values that are input in a formula, what I'm going to do, you can see that in formula, in front of every piece of formula there is a coefficient and something next to it. All these inputs, I'm going to group them and create a separate line that is going to calculate them. Now when we have that, we can actually determine is our boat suitable for series or not. There are limitations that were given with formulas, and if you are too much outside of that range, don't use that formula. It's very simple. We are just on the limit with two inputs. One is breadth versus length. The other one is displacement on 1/3 versus length. So we are on the limit, but we are still there. But be careful, if you are way too off the range of series, don't use that series. It's simple as it is. Now, when we have determined that we can use Delft series for prediction of residual resistance, I'm going to type in the formula in Excel and multiply it over the range of speeds. And that's our residual resistance. Now, getting to total resistance is quite simple. Just sum frictional and residual resistance and we have a total resistance. And that's it. So now next step is to calculate power, which is very simple. We just need to multiply resistance with the speed. But this is just effective power. This is power needed to push the ship through the water. It's not engine power. It's power needed for the hull. In between power needed for the hull and engine power, there are losses. Losses are on the gearbox, losses are in the shaft, losses are on the propeller. And I'm not going into details with this. In this stage, I'm not going to bother if it is 2 or 3% on a gearbox, if it is 2% on a shaft, is propeller 60 or 59% efficient. I'm just going to say my complete propulsion train is 50% efficient. And then I can calculate from effective power, I can calculate horsepowers needed on the engine to propel my boat with certain speed. So that's it. Early stage, don't bother with details. The most important part is that the weight of the propeller with one pitch is the same as the weight of propeller with another pitch. The price of the engine is going to be the same whether you have more pitched propeller or less pitched propeller. So early stage, focus on big picture, not on the details. Now I'm going to create a graph. I will use engine power for that. And then you can see that after Froude number 0.4, or in our case 5.6 knots of speed, the required power, or engine power in this case, just lifts up. So to reach just few knots, not even full knot more, you need 3 times more power. So it doesn't make sense neither calculate speeds that are higher than Froude number 0.4, neither to push to that speed. So be careful with this, because required speed is actually determining the length of the hull. And if somebody comes to you and asks you to create 6-meter boat and to go 15 knots, you know that you're in semi-displacement range, so you know how to start with the hull. So that's what we can learn from this graph. What is else interesting? Now we have 2 prediction methods that we done, and they give us almost same results. I mean, if we take into account that we just calculated frictional and residual resistance, that means that we skipped something. And if we just put 10% on top of it, we have the same results, 4 horsepower for 5.6 knots. That means that our calculation is precise. And next step is to pick up the engine from portfolio of some supplier, manufacturer, whatever you like to call it. I'm choosing Yamaha. I'm not sponsored by Yamaha or anything else. I just love to use them because they have a 3D library on their webpage. So it's easy for me to put all that in models. If we scroll through their website, we can see that they have different models. However, if I pick up 5 or 4 horsepower, we can see that the only possible way to use that engine is with a tiller. Our client asked that there is a remote control for the engine and steering. So we need to go size up. I'm just going to choose 9.9 horsepower and that's it. One more benefit of picking up higher engine power than what is really required is that on journeys of 2 hours you don't want to listen engine working on 5000 RPMs all the time. It's annoying. So if we take 9.9, that means it's going to work most probably on 40 to 50% of engine RPM, which is 2,500, and that's significantly lower noise than 5000. Next step is that I'm going to download 3D model, import that 3D model in 3D model of our boat. As you can see in the owner's manual, there is recommendation that cavitation plate of complete engine is positioned 1 inch or 25 millimeters below the bottom plate, and that's exactly how we are going to position our engine. Then I will make a cutout for engine on a transom and on a deck, and that's it. I know that this episode was fully packed with information. I summarize it as much as I could so you can do this by yourself. In one of the future videos, I will start going more into details about every component of the resistance. For now, you can calculate it yourself. In order to make your life easier, everything what has been done in this video, you can find in a spreadsheet that I created. Download link is in description below. In that spreadsheet, you can find also glossary for all the terms that are in the spreadsheet. And also I created small report that you can print for yourself. Of course, this is educational spreadsheet, so I wouldn't recommend using it in a commercial purpose. And that's it for this episode. Well, you learn how to size engine for your boat. Whether you use method from the beginning of video or you use Delft series, whether you use your own spreadsheet or the one that I created, doesn't matter. Just do it. Make one more step in your boat design. See you next time. And that concludes this episode. Don't hesitate to share your thoughts or ask a question. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you didn't, hit the thumbs down. And please share your thoughts in the comments so I can improve future content. Don't forget to subscribe and thank you for watching.